Welcome back to the Neighbors Podcast. Season 2 is off and rolling, and it has been so great. I hope you've enjoyed it just as much as I have, and today is no exception. We have on Lonnie Phillips for this week's episode. Lonnie is the Chief Customer Officer at Fanatics. He is an incredible leader. He leads tens of thousands of people, but he is one of the most biblically grounded, full of humility, full of grace people. Just fun to talk to. He's such an articulate communicator, so many life lessons. His childhood was wild, and he shares a lot about his story and why he is the way that he is today. But I learned so much that I'm taking away. The biggest thing is, how can I be intentional about nourishing my soul? This phrase, I can't get enough of it, nourishing my soul. And he just challenges everybody to be 1% better each day. And that might not look like trying harder, working harder. It might actually look like rest and slowing down. And we talk about all of it. So I'm so excited for you to hear it. I was so encouraged by it, and I hope you will be too. Here's my conversation with Lonnie Phillips. All right, well, welcome to the Neighbors Podcast, Lonnie. Thank you so much for being here. We met actually about a year ago. We went to Israel together.
We did.
And that was, you guys have been to Israel a couple of times.
At least one other time. Yeah.
Okay,
That
was our first time. I have to say, I have not eaten hummus since our Israel trip.
Well, I'll tell you something funny. We met, and the reason you stood out to me on that trip, two reasons. The first morning when we go down to breakfast, and you had an entire loaf of like Wonder Bread,
Yeah.
and you're making your own sandwich. Like, I'm like, what is this girl doing? Like, in Israel. I thought it was so funny. But then, obviously, we got a chance to spend some time with you, and you're just, like, you radiate like positivity and joy. So we naturally were drawn to you and obviously Wes.
Well, okay, the reason I had a loaf of bread and jar of peanut, I think I was like 8 weeks pregnant at that point.
Yeah.
And I was pretty nauseous, and the food in Israel really is good.
It's amazing.
It's just the same. Like, every meal is so many of the same foods.
Yeah.
So at first I was just crushing hummus because I was like, that is like one of the foods that actually sounded good. And then by day 4, I was like, I can't even look at a chickpea.
Yeah.
And it has been a full year, and I have tried it a couple times, and it just brings me back. The smell, it's like the smell, all the feeling just brings me right back to 8-week pregnancy nausea. So I don't know if I'll ever eat hummus again, but it was I really crushed it while I was there eating. You just eat bowls of hummus in Israel.
You do.
But y'all travel a lot, and you've been to some really cool places. What would you say is like the coolest place that you've been?
Tough question. My wife and I love to get off the grid and hike, and part of it is because my job, I like to get away from my phone and my laptop.
Sure.
So we've hiked through Patagonia in South America. We've done some high altitude volcano hikes in Atacama, Chile, like over 18,000 feet, which was pretty cool. We were just last year, we went to Ireland, which is not typically what you would think of like big hikes, and we found some pretty remote off the grid kind of hikes and did some pretty neat stuff. So I don't know that I have a favorite, but any of those. We often say Patagonia is our favorite. We actually named our dog Patagonia.
Obviously.
After that, so it's kind of cool. It reminds us of it. But it's pretty special.
I think we talked about this, but it's so random because Atacama, Chile is like the actual middle of nowhere. And we went there on our honeymoon.
Did you really?
Yeah. So maybe we haven't talked about this, but
know
our honeymoon was kind of a surprise. My dad, it's a long story. We don't need to get into the whole thing, but my dad planned for my 2 sisters and I surprise honeymoons. So like literal surprises. We had no clue where we were going.
I remember this.
So we just show up at the airport and we're like, oh, we're going to Chile. That's all we know. And then we get there and it's like, go here. And so we had never heard of Atacama. We land in this airport. I mean, there's nothing around. It's just dust and more sand and more dust. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the driest place on earth.
Dry, and you feel it. You straight raisin when you get off the plane. And then we get into this van we were probably packed and there were 12 people. The driver speaks no English. I was slightly a Spanish minor in college, loosely. So I can barely survive, but you needed it here.
Yeah.
And we're driving and we're going through downtown, and some of the hostels there are so scary. And I'm thinking, my dad got scammed. Like, he signed us up for something and had no idea. And we're about to get dropped off and stay in a cardboard box in a dust bowl.
Yeah.
And then we ended up going around this curve. We were the last people to Wilderness Corner, and it's just the coolest, all made out of mud, clay resort that I've ever seen. We talk about to this day how it was the coolest place we've ever been.
Yeah.
And the hikes there, it was just the most unique place.
It was.
And I've never heard of anybody else knowing about it. I didn't even know people knew about it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
We loved it. And we were there when COVID was breaking out. So every day we're like looking at our phones and watching flights around the world getting canceled. So we ended up having to come home like 2 days early because we just didn't want to get stuck in Atacama.
Yeah, yes.
So
just eating dust. Yeah. Okay, what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you on a trip?
The weirdest thing?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know what the weirdest thing would be. I can say maybe a cool thing.
Okay.
So we were in Peru and doing these hikes, and we like the specific hotel chain where it's all about adventures. You launch out of the hotel on adventures, and that while we were there was a chef that was visiting to help redo their menu, and he had been on this thing called Chef's Table on Netflix.
Yeah,
and we liked that show, and he was like season 1, episode 1 or 2, and he has this restaurant. It's like top 5 restaurant in the world. And the day we're leaving, they're like, hey, his sous chef is going to be in the van with you and ride with you. And it's like a couple-hour drive. So we ride with this guy, and he's awesome. He's from Argentina and super humble, and we're chatting with him, and I find out like he's a huge soccer fan, but I also find out like they don't make a lot of money, these sous chefs, even though he's at like a top 5 restaurant in the world. And I just say, hey, give me your address, and I'll send you a bunch of gear. And he's like, sure, So he gives his address. When I get back, I just send him like a box of like all kinds of soccer stuff from football teams, soccer teams, like all over the world. Yeah. And he was super appreciative, of course. And then like a year later, I get this. I think actually Megan May got the text from him that said, hey, are you guys around this weekend? We're going to do a pop-up of the restaurant's called Central. We're going to do a pop-up of Central in New York. And we'd like you to be our guest at it. And we were like, what?
So fun.
So like we had like airline points and free miles at a hotel. So we flew up to New York overnight, basically did dinner with him, his special guest, this like the most incredible thing you've ever eaten in your life. And he kept coming out from the kitchen, the sous chef, and giving and talking to us. And I think the other people that were there were like, must have thought we were pretty special.
Yeah, for
and,
sure.
Like, he had brought us,
celebrities are these?
Yeah, he brought us like corn from Peruvian corn and special salts. And he is making special things for Megan because she's a vegan. And so I think people were trying to probably figure out who we were.
For 100%.
So it's pretty cool.
Okay, and not to over spiritualize this, but that is such a good reminder that you just literally never know when you're nice, when you're kind to someone,
for sure, how
it could come back around. And
for sure.
I mean, what an incredible opportunity just because you took that extra step to be thoughtful.
That's right.
And I mean, that guy certainly never forgot it. And what skin was it off your back? I mean, you work for a sport gear company.
That's right.
So it's like, and so just to take that extra step to show him that you were thinking about him, and then you end up with like one of the coolest experiences that you're still talking about today.
It was amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in the Navy for over 20 years. We'll get to where you're at in your career today, but much of your career was in the Navy.
Yeah.
Why did you go into the Navy? And then what was it like, what lessons did you learn from your time serving in the Navy?
So I have the coolest story ever about why I joined.
Oh, great.
Has nothing to do with serving my country or any of that stuff.
Perfect.
Legitimately, like I was a huge soccer player as a kid, and had some scholarships to play soccer in college. And I lived with my grandmother. My parents had passed away and everything, and I come home from school one day, and I'm young. I had skipped a grade early on, so I'm like as a senior, I'm 16 years old, like type thing. And there's this little like pamphlet, and it says, join the Navy, and they'll pay you to go to college. And I'm like, pay? That's better than a scholarship. Scholarship doesn't pay you anything. So I go to the Navy recruiter, and I'm like, hey, this thing says you'll pay me to go to college, and he's like, yeah. And they take me in. They give me the test. It's called an ASVAB, and like I basically aced this thing. And now they're like, they got somebody, So they start talking to me. They introduced me to somebody, and they said, hey, there's this job working on nuclear submarines and working on nuclear missiles. And they make it sound amazing. And they're like, if you sign this, what you'll do is it'll hold the job in case you ever decide to do this. And I'm like, well, that's great. Like I could go to college. If it doesn't work out, I could always come back and do this. This is my little 16-year-old brain. So I sign. They walk me into a room, and there's a bunch of people in there that are all raising their right hand, and they're swearing into the Navy. And I walk out. I'm like, oh, I'm wrong room. And my recruiter's there, and he shakes my hand. He's like, congratulations, you're in the Navy. And I'm like, no, I thought I was just holding my job. He's like, no, you're in the Navy.
Oh, no.
Now, technically, I was not. Like, my grandmother had to sign me over, but they did the same bait and switch on her and fooled her. And so she actually signed me into the Navy. So I had joined. So I went
accidentally joined the Navy.
Yeah, so I went in like very disgruntled.
Yes, and, well, of course.
But to be honest, like you talk about like God's hand on it. I was too much of a goof off, I think, and not disciplined enough that I would have probably dropped out of college, honestly. Wow. So the military was exactly what I needed, even though I was so young, and yeah, it ended up being perfect for me.
Wow. Okay, so Megan was also, that's how you met. She was in the Navy.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you guys make your beds perfectly every morning still?
For sure.
You have to.
Even when we stay in hotels. Like,
no.
Always make our beds. Yeah.
Even in hotels? That's like the best part about being in a hotel.
It's
crazy. You can't do it.
Yeah.
You literally can't do it.
We always straighten everything up. Everything's like tidy and organized.
Perfect for each other.
Yeah. We're so perfect.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you actually go to work on nuclear weaponry and submarines and all that?
I did. My first kind of 6 years was spent working. I was on a submarine out of Kings Bay, Georgia, and that's what I did. Worked on the navigation system for nuclear missiles, and then I was able to pick up a commissioning program. I was going to school at night, so I had my first kind of 2 years of college going to school at night, and then picked up a commissioning program. Went to the University of Florida, finished my degree, and then became a pilot. And then I flew for about 15 years.
Wow.
So,
okay, so then now you are the Chief Customer Officer at Fanatics. And so how did you go from Navy pilot to Chief Executive Officer at a giant company?
You're gonna see this trend of just like falling into things, and then making the best of it.
This accidentally happened also?
Yeah. So I'm retiring from the Navy. This is back in 2008. And Megan and I are in Virginia, and we want to live in Kentucky because my son is in Kentucky. Okay. And she wants to go back and get her PhD. So she's looking University of Kentucky, Louisville, the whole bit. And I'm looking for jobs. And my master's was in sport management. So I actually wanted to go work for like an athletic association.
Wait, why? Oh, okay. That's what
I wanted to do. I wanted to be like an athletic director someday, but like at a really tiny school. Like my expectations of myself have always been like relatively small. So I'm like, really small school. But I start putting resumes out there, and I can't get anybody to even interview me or acknowledge that I am a person on this planet. And now I'm freaking out because I'm getting really close to the day that I'm leaving. I know Megan wants to go to school, and like as a man, you're like, I've got to be able to support my family. And I'm freaking out. Nobody's replying to anything. And this headhunter says, hey, Amazon is looking for warehouse managers in Kentucky. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to work in a warehouse, right? I'm like you said, I just came from flying aircraft, which is kind of cool. And like the thought of working in a warehouse did not sound cool to me. So I go to do this interview in Kentucky, and it's summer, so it's really hot. And you go in the building, and everybody in the building is they call it, they walk with purpose. There's like a sense of purpose about what everybody's doing because every second matters. An aircraft carrier. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And then I go in the interview, and the interview is very contentious. It's 5 people and me. It feels like 5 against 1 in a room that's non-air conditioned, in a building that's non-air conditioned in Kentucky in the middle of the summer, and it's hot. And every answer I provide, they contest. It's just the Amazon way. They want to like push you and see how you think. And I actually enjoyed that. I really did. So when I get done, the guy who was a general manager at the time said, hey, we really want to hire you, but we need you to see why you should not work here. So you get the full picture. So we're going to take you out. We're going to introduce you to the most disgruntled manager we have. We're going to have her turn her filter off and tell you why you should leave, why you should run. So he did. He introduced me to this. Her name was Ashley Persant. We're good friends today. And Ashley turned the filter off, and she just went off on Amazon, like unbelievable. And I always say, like, you can have like one of probably 3 reactions to that. Like, you can hear that and go, I'm going to run. You can hear that and go, man, there's so much opportunity. you can also hear that and be very arrogant and go, all the stuff that's impacting you would not impact me that way. I'm so much better than that. I was somewhere between 2 and 3.
Okay.
And I remember walking out and I called Megan and I said, I'm going to take this job. And she's like, what? She's like, I thought you were going for like interview practice. You weren't really interested. I said, no, but like, I like the pace of this place. So I ended up working at Amazon for 6 years. I promoted super fast.
Wow.
Was the fastest promoted person, I think, in the history of Amazon. I ended up, by the time I left, I had 25,000 people working for me,
Oh my gosh.
almost 90,000 during the holidays, massive organization.
Yeah.
And all that led to this opportunity when Fanatics had a change in ownership and we're looking for a new executive team to kind of step in and kind of build this company. So I was part of the kind of early growth of Amazon, and then I got to come here and kind of build Fanatics, which was cool.
Wow, that's awesome. So you had a harder childhood than most, and this feels like a hard right turn from talking about, 25,000 people working for you, but I think it has an impact on your leadership and why you probably liked an interview where they're just coming against you, and you get to keep providing answers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and what you went through and what you learned from it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So my mom had me. She had me when she was 16, which means she was pregnant at 15. Oh. My real dad, I think, was 17 or 18, and they got married because she got pregnant, and then they were divorced. I mean, super fast, within months. My mom was married and divorced 3 times before I was 5.
Wow.
When I was 5, I get my third dad, and he was extremely abusive. I mean, in the most violent ways imaginable. Physically, emotionally. He was a weightlifter who was on steroids. And in addition to that, he was an alcoholic and on drugs. So he had all these things that just pushed him to that. And he was, I would always say, as violent as he was physically to me and my mom, some of the most horrific things you can imagine, it was the mental abuse that was so much worse on me. So it was this constant, you're stupid, you're dumb.
He literally would say this.
Yeah, you're never going to amount to anything. He would tell me all the time, you should just kill yourself. You're a waste of life. This is as a young child, so you can imagine the impact it has. So what it did for me was, it became a very unhealthy driving mechanism in my life to prove him wrong at every step, all the way into my adult life. And, I was so I talked about being a soccer player as a kid. I played on the national team, but that was because I was trying to prove to him that I could do that. I told you I skipped a grade. I poured myself into everything I did. I was trying to prove to him
that you were worthy.
That I was worthy, that I wasn't stupid. I wasn't dumb. What I did, though, is I destroyed personal relationships along the way because I was so focused on him and proving him wrong. And it really wasn't until we were living in Lexington, I was working for Amazon, and Megan and I's marriage was basically done. Because I was chasing the applause of a man that I didn't even talk to anymore. I had no contact with him, right? I was chasing the applause of him and trying to do this success thing, and completely neglecting her and my son. And we basically had just grown apart where we didn't even want to be together anymore. And thankfully, it was kind of like a last-ditch effort in our marriage. We wandered into a church in Lexington, Kentucky, and it was a very authentic, vulnerable church where people shared everything. People shared stuff from the stage that you just didn't think people would share in a church. And we met people, God basically in the first day introduced us to couples that we became really good friends with that actually also led the marriage ministry there. They had a pretty powerful recovery ministry, and we just started work. And I was able to kind of break the ties of this, and then have this amazing forgiveness journey with my stepdad that we can talk about if wanted. But so what I found is I have this innate thing in me to really be, I think it's not really to be successful, but it's really to work hard. And now I can work hard in a healthy way. I'm not working so hard because I'm trying to appease him.
Yeah, so that is so interesting because it's not that you went from success to success, but there was healing in it. So what is the difference between but before you went through the healing and after, as far as the world defines success?
I think it's a really good question. I think before, the success was how many people was I leading? What was my title? What was my name and my voice? What did it mean? Like, I'm in a company, Amazon, that's massive, and I have a really big voice, making good money, like all the things that the world would say is defined success. I think post all of that, and even to like into today, I think like my definition of success is really like my marriage to Megan, and the way that we interact. My job is just as hard today as it was then. I accomplished probably just as much, but I think it's like my marriage is so healthy in the midst of it, and I think the way that I use my platform now to basically advance the gospel. Sorry, I hit that thing. I never thought about it before. I always knew about God. My mom, before she died, you know, she had given her life to Christ and really had done some things so that I was aware, and I had given my life to Christ. But it wasn't until I had the healing that I realized that, man, I need to use this platform that I have to advance the kingdom. Because I'll tell you an interesting thing. I've always, since I was a kid, when I first heard about God, like before I even knew Jesus and redemption and salvation and any of the cool words, like I felt like I was called to do something, but I couldn't really define it. And then years later, as I went through this healing, I was at this like men's retreat where like they do these things where like there's rocks with words on it, and you just go pick up a rock and that's your word. And my word was commissioned, and it like wrecked me to the core, because it was like I can remember the very first time that Megan and I like talked about dating. I told her at that time, I feel like I'm called to do something for like God. And I couldn't put words to it. And all of a sudden it's like, man, you're commissioned. And then I remember talking to a pastor, and I said, I feel like I need to leave my job and go work for the church. And he's like, why? And I said, because I feel like I have this ability to influence people, and I should be spending the best hours of my day advancing the kingdom. And he's like, how many people work for you again?
He's like,
you've got like the biggest platform there is.
Right.
And so it's pretty cool. Like when I think about like where I work now, like the people around me are all Christians, my peers, like we're vulnerable with each other. We share the gospel. We're just this morning, we're trading devotionals and songs together. And like you think about that stuff, and it's this like, I think it's how I walk my success out is like a reflection of like who I am in him, and like the redemptive nature of what he's done for me, I think is the definition of success now, as opposed to what it used to be.
Oh, that's so great. And I like it because it doesn't mean you have to stop working hard and achieving great things and moving up the ladder in the corporate world. It's just the why behind what you're doing. So can you just encourage people who have that in them? Like, I want to achieve big things. Like, that in and of itself isn't bad. It's just what you do with it.
For sure. I'll do this. I'll answer the question in a roundabout way. So I'll always get this question whenever I do interviews or whatever, is like, hey, like, you know, what do you think made you successful, or what would make people successful? And I have this little thing, I call it the 3 Ps: passion, for people, and process. So what I always say is like, when you hear the word passion, people go, oh, that means like if I want to be a successful leader or professional, whatever, I need to be a rah-rah cheerleader. And I say, no, like you could be an introvert and be a highly successful leader. We have them all throughout history. Passion for me is, let's say that I have, you know, you have your new baby, and, you know, she's up, throwing up in the middle of the night, and you don't get any sleep, and you're miserable. And then you get up in the morning, and, you know, Wes was supposed to take out the trash, and he didn't take out the trash, and now the house smells like onion from the dinner before. And like your whole morning is, you're tired, you're frustrated, you're angry, and now you got to go to work with all of that, right? And I joke like those things are like just kind of normal life problems, but it could be like real stuff too. Like you could just have found out your mom is terminal cancer, and you've got the weight of that on you, and now you have to go to work. And if you're a leader, you have to lead through that. And I always say like passion for me is like, do you like or love what you do enough that you can compartmentalize that? It doesn't mean that that is any less important. It's the most important. leading. And I'll always use this example of, let's say I walk in and I just found out that my grandmother is about to pass away, who raised me. And I have an employee walk up to me and they're angry because we don't have sugar-free orange juice in the drink machine. Like, think about it. Like,
I'm sure that's never happened.
Let's weigh those two things, right? But like for me, it's like, but what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to focus on that person, talk to them, hear their problem, solve their problem, or tell them why I can't solve their problem. But at least let them walk away feeling heard, valued in my organization. For me, that's passion. Like, because if I don't like what I do, there's no way I could ever do that. So you have to like or love enough to have that kind of passion. And then I always say, can you take the passion and apply it to people and process? Are you like every single day trying to get 1% better at what you're doing? So when you start thinking about like the 3 Ps, and you could be an individual contributor or leader, they really do apply to no matter what you do. For me, it's like when I say a passion for people, there's a godly piece to that, which is, do you love people? Do you love your neighbor? Do you love them enough that you want to put their needs above your needs? And if you can do that, like, you're going to be a highly successful leader and still be serving the kingdom in the way that Jesus called us to serve. So,
wow, so good. So how are you still getting 1% better? Like, people could look at you and think, well, he's made it. I mean, you're at the pinnacle of your career. You have an amazing marriage. You go on cool trips. But you seem like the kind of person who's probably never quite satisfied, like always wanting to keep getting that 1% better. So how do you still do it?
Are you married?
Yeah.
Like every day, right? Every day is a challenge.
Sure.
So it's like, it's work to be a good husband every single day. Like, and I think you're always striving to do that. And then when I go to work, like every day there's something that I can do to either make myself better or my team better. I'm reading this book right now. It's called Get Your Life Back by John Eldredge. I'm a huge Eldredge fan.
Love John Eldredge.
So Eldredge and like Wild at Heart and Fathered by God is what really began my healing from my stepdad.
Yeah.
So he has this book called Get Your Life Back, and it's all about your soul and like today and technology and the way it's, it's
fascinating,
sucking our soul, if you will. And so like I'm reading that last night, and I have my EA actually goes to 11:22, and so she called me, and somehow we got on a conversation about it, and it's like I get to share with her this book that I'm reading, and because she's trying to find ways to carve out time to spend more time with God. And then the same thing is like one of my VPs this morning. I'm like, so it's like every day I'm trying to get 1% better in my job, but also 1% better in how am I advancing the kingdom and sharing those types of things.
Absolutely. That's incredible. I am on a bit of a social experiment. We touched on this. I'm just fascinated with the concept of grit. And I read a book when I was in college by Angela Duckworth about grit.
I know it.
And I don't know, it's just something anyone I meet, I'm always kind of running through this filter of their level of grit, not in like a judgmental way, just I find it interesting because I still am not convinced whether or not it can be learned or if it's just natural. So I would just love your thoughts on it as someone who definitely has grit. A, where have you seen that play out and the importance of it? And B, like, do you think it can be taught, or is it just something that naturally?
I think you have to have it to be a successful leader. In my world specifically, in this, I lead kind of like fulfillment and manufacturing and transportation and customer service, supply chain. It's such a dynamic world, and every single day there's like major issues that sometimes could be paralyzing in nature. And I always say, like, the team that I have built, they're just warriors. Like, they'll complain quickly, and then they move really fast to how do we go solve these problems. And that's grit to me. It's like, does it immobilize you, or does it excite you and you lean into it? I don't know that it can be taught. I think that people can obviously observe it and see it, and they can put it into action. But I think the true leaders like probably inherently have that. And it might just be that it's like me, maybe I did have it, or maybe my upbringing instilled it in me. I don't know.
Sure.
But
so speaking of your upbringing, I'd love to circle back on your forgiveness journey with your stepdad. What did that end up looking like?
Oh my gosh, it was so powerful. So I did all this healing work with a group of guys. There was 5 guys, and that we were in this little group. We called it. There's a Eldridge term called becoming good soil, which is like tilling the soil, so it's healthy enough that when God puts His seed there, things can grow. And we were very transparent, and honest with each other. And along the way, I did all this healing work to where I had felt free from. His name is Eddie. Free from Eddie. And they kept telling me, "Hey, man, like you gotta. The thing you have to do to finish this is you have to tell him you forgive him." And I'm like, I don't understand why.
No, I'm good.
I've forgiven him. All is good. And they wore me out. And I bet you, I'm not kidding you, it was like 2 years of this.
And you had no contact with him at this point?
None.
Okay.
I had seen him. I won't get the times right, but I had probably seen him maybe 15 years prior to that.
Okay.
Had bumped into him by accident, and he had given his life to Christ. And he was leading up in northern Wisconsin. He leads a camp for men that were like him, that are either court appointed to be there or they voluntarily go there. But he basically, it's Christian based. So he had bumped into me and he had asked me for forgiveness. And I was a jerk. I just told him, I was like get out of my face. It's between you and God. I was not in a great place and I didn't want to talk to him. So, this is like 15 years later, I'm doing all this work, and we decide okay, I'm going to do it. So I tell them I'm going to call him. I don't know the exact, it's like a Tuesday morning at 9:00. So I figure if I give a date and a time, now I'm on the hook because I told him. Yeah. So I'm really stressed. And I think it's the weirdest thing, Allie, is that I was scared to call him because I think in my mind, I still felt like a little kid and he still felt like this really big, ogreish, violent man. Even though at this point I'm in my 40s and he's probably in his going in 70s, type thing. But I was scared to death to call him. And I'm driving around just trying to waste time. And there's a Christian radio station on. And I don't even remember what the DJ says, but they say something about like basically how the light pushes out the darkness. And it was like this indication of I didn't need to be scared because I had Jesus on my side. And I pulled into a Lowe's parking lot. I can still remember it. It's raining outside, so I got the windshield wipers on, and I call him. And he answers, and I said, may I speak with Eddie? And he's like, "This is Eddie." I said, "Eddie, this is Lonnie." And he's like, "Who?" And I said, "It's Lonnie." And there's this really long pause. He's like, "My son, Lonnie?" Which that was hard because I didn't want him to say I was his son. But I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "It is." I said, "I just want to talk to you." And I said, I've been doing all of this forgiveness work and healing work for all the things that you did to me as a child. I said, and I've healed from all of that. I said, but I feel like there's one last step, which is I need to forgive you. I said, so I need you to hear the words that I just forgive you for all of it. And there was this, it still brings tears in my eyes. This really long pause. And then it was the most overwhelming cry you've ever heard in your life. Where he couldn't even compose himself. And he just said, I've been waiting 25 years to hear those words. And he said, every boy and every man who's come through this camp knows your name. They know what I did to you, and they know what you overcame. And he goes, you have been a ray of hope for thousands of boys that have come through this place.
Wow.
So I was crying. And I had told Megan before, she's like, what are you going to do if he wants to have a relationship with you? And I'm like, I don't want a relationship. I just want to say I forgive him. So, of course, he said, would it be okay if we talk or text once in a while? And I was just like, yeah, it'd be great. And I clearly heard too, I heard the voice of God. It's well done, well done. Then we texted a couple times, but we haven't talked in over a decade, at all. But, man, the relief of that was the weight of that was unbelievable that came off my shoulders.
Wow.
So.
And just to know that all the pain you endured had a purpose. And even though it was at your expense, which sometimes that's really hard to reconcile with the Lord.
That's true.
Why would you let this come through your hand? And then to hear that thousands of boys, that you've been a ray of hope, that term, a ray of hope, it just probably brings some little bit of the picture a little bit clearer this side of heaven.
It does.
Of God, why would you let that sift through your
That's
hands?
right.
Like you kind of see that and
That's
go,
right.
okay, there's something there.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure when you get to heaven too, I mean, then it all becomes clear, and then
Yeah.
you get to see the faces of maybe the boys and the men that you saved from a similar path. Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
That's powerful.
So yeah, what is the power of forgiveness? I mean, we know it's biblical. We know we're called to do it. It can feel really hard sometimes. What do you feel like now? I mean, that's a huge forgiveness story and experience that you went through. What now in the past decade have you seen in the power of that conversation?
I think I am so much faster to forgive because maybe selfishly, I recognize the benefit to myself of that forgiveness. Like when I did that, it was like what it did for me. But at the same time, obviously, like hearing him, then like what it did for him. And it's like, do I really want to hold people hostage over some sort of wrong? So because I understand kind of both sides of the coin based on that whole situation,
And I think it's important to note that we're not always called to forgiveness and reconciliation. Like we don't have to forgive and then be best friends.
That's right.
Call each other every day.
That's
and
right.
I think there is power in people hearing that the forgiveness part we are called to, and that is an important part of a healing process. But you can still live. It doesn't mean you have to be back in relationship with that person.
That's exactly right.
Even if, I mean, and who knows what your paths might cross in the future. And but yeah, just to know that you did the part that you were called to, which is so incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so final question, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but what is your advice for aspiring leaders or current leaders, wherever they are, no matter what industry they're in? But let's talk maybe like in the secular world, not if they're not in ministry, but they love the Lord. What is your advice to them?
Gosh, that's hard. Don't be scared to bet on yourself. I took that job at Amazon. I knew nothing about warehousing. I knew nothing about supply chain. I knew nothing about e-commerce. It was as polar opposite of anything that I've ever done in my life. But I was willing to bet on myself. And then work hard, obviously. Yeah. And then I always think there's this. You've probably heard this term. It's an Army saying, and I was Navy, so we don't really like the Army too much. But
you're going to borrow their sayings.
Yeah. They say embrace the suck.
Oh, yes.
Have you heard that?
I have.
It's like, it's just one of these things like life is hard and work is harder. That's why it's work. I always say it'd be vacation if it wasn't hard.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you're going to have all these challenges, but like kind of embrace them and figure out like what can they do to grow you professionally. And what you'll find is if you do embrace the suck, embrace the challenges and lean into those challenges and then try to overcome those challenges, you'll actually be rewarded for that because those are the kind of people that people want to follow, but those are also the people that leaders want to promote in their organizations. That's
great.
Those people that will not stop at a wall.
Yeah.
They'll find a way around it. And I always say, by the way, like you don't have to run through the wall. There might be doors in the room. You want to be able to like be smart enough to look for the doors. And then if there isn't a door, you got to have the grit or whatever it is to go through the wall.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. So then putting on like the believer lens, how do you stay biblically grounded in that pursuit of success and growth?
Yeah, I think it's intentionality. You have to be very intentional in your walk with the Lord. It's very easy to, like, I can use my life as an example. Like I run a global operation that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's always something going on. There's always a response that's needed right now to somebody. So I can get up in the morning and I can start working at 5 o'clock easily. And the next thing I know, I can lift my head and it's 10 o'clock and I haven't done anything. So I have to be super intentional about reading the Bible first and foremost. Like, thank goodness for the 1122 Bible app.
Yeah.
Because it gets me going. Like, that's my first. Like, I read that. And then I do the Ransom Heart, which is John. My day. And then I can start getting into that. I mentioned I'm reading this book, Get Your Life Back. And it's all about how do you find that intentional time with him so that it nourishes your soul. And those are the things that I'm still working on, because part of my real challenge is like, I do love to work. I do love my job, but my job will take every ounce of my soul. And I have to continue to fight for my soul. And that's, you talk about getting 1% better. It's like every day I'm trying to find that, like, how do I stop and pause? You know, Megan's out of town right now. And so I got, normally at night, like, we're talking, but we don't have this time to talk. So now I'm like by myself.
I'll work.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'll just work.
Yeah.
Like, it's awesome. I have so much time to work. Whereas opposed to, like, I should really be leaning into Jesus during that time, because I wouldn't be working normally. I'd be talking to her and having dinner with her, but why am I not opening the Bible? So these are things that I'm still challenged with and trying to work through. Nourishing
the soul is such an interesting way to look at spending time in the Word.
Yeah.
That, I mean, nourishment, we think about, we were talking even before we recorded this, just about the food we put in our body. And there are nourishing foods and not as nourishing foods.
That's right.
And to think about the first thing when you wake up, like, there are things that are nourishing for your soul and that are not, and things that will sustain you for the day and things that won't.
That's right.
And that's just, I haven't heard that. It's just such an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, it really is. He has this story where he says he's in Kauai and he's walking on the beach of Kauai, and he's like, he walks by and there's a guy sitting up there, and he's on his phone watching a YouTube video. And he thinks to himself, he's like, you're in nature, you're in God's creation. Like, you have like the most beautiful scenery ever. This is a time where your soul could be like completely nourished by the beauty of God. And this guy is on his video. He's like, but then I quickly go, you know what? But just 10 minutes before that, my phone buzzed with a text message from work, and I'm answering a text message from work. Like, this guy could have just had a friend just send him a video and said, hey, watch this video real quick. But the whole point is, like, these, like, your mobile devices, your apps and stuff. And his premise is, like, everything is such a, everything's like so fast these days. Like, nobody reads books anymore because you want to read a short article. You know, you want to flip and scroll and everything. And what we're doing is conditioning our brains to be like super active and to manage a lot of things, when really what you need to do is slow down and really concentrate and have this intentional approach to, like, nourishing your soul. And it's getting harder and harder for us because of the way that, you know, media is impacting us. So.
I have a similar experience. I was at a Hillsong conference one time, and they went Hillsong. It was when Oceans was the #1 Christian song forever and ever. And so they went to sing Oceans, like the final night response song, and Taya Smith stands up to sing Oceans, and everybody gets their phones out. And the pastor, he comes out, he stops everybody in the middle of worship. And he's like, we missed it. Like, you got your phone out, but this isn't a performance. Like, this is worship. So he made everybody put their phones away. He made them re-sing the song. And it was so beautiful, because then everybody had that moment of, oh, yeah, I need to be present in where God has put me, instead of my just knee-jerk reaction is, oh, this is such a cool moment I want to capture.
That's right.
Which is just something we have to war against, honestly, in this day and age.
We do.
Yeah.
And we talked about early, like, you know, Megan and I like to get off the grid. And part of the reason we do that is because I always say I want to get closer to God. It's the closest I'm ever to Him, is when we are in the mountains away from everything. I have no electronics, and all I have is His beauty around me. But, you know, like, we live at the beach. Like, this is a gorgeous place. And, like, I'm fortunate to live 2 blocks from the beach, and I rarely go over the sand dune, and I should, right? And
so
just
true.
And appreciate it. So I need to. That's my 1% better.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Because honestly, like, I will be a far better leader and professional if I'm nourishing my soul in Christ.
And it's countercultural, because your 1% better is actually slowing down and doing less.
Isn't it crazy?
Where the world would say, no, get up early, get to work 3 hours early. No, run yourself ragged.
That's right.
Join a workshop, go to this, go to that. And your 1% better, which is right and good, is actually, like, being more intentional with spending time with the Lord, slowing down, being present. That is what's going to make me a better leader.
For sure.
Okay, last question that I always like to ask.
You said last question already before.
I know, but this is like the real last question. This is like the fun last question.
Oh, okay.
What is something you are loving right now, outside of work, outside of anything, like just a fun thing that you're loving? Could be a food, activity.
I really love golf. I love golf because I love to be outside. I was just playing this past weekend with some buddies, and I said, you know, it isn't even about how I play. It's about being with my friends outside. because I have a job that's inside, so I love being outside, and I don't get to play enough because of my job. And I that's another one. I want to be a little more intentional. Like, can I play once a month? Because I play maybe 4 times or 5 times a year now. But I do, and I really do love it.
Well, I know someone else that enjoys golf who's sitting behind the camera who also wants to play more. So you can have a golfing friend. I personally can't get into golf. I just can't. It's too hot outside. I mean, right now it's nice here, but it's too long. Wes's dream is for us to play golf together. Does Megan play?
Megan does not, but Megan actually likes to ride because she loves being outside and she loves the beauty of golf courses.
Don't say it.
So she just wants to ride. We're going to. We have really good friends that have a place in Cabo. We're going in a couple weeks to their place, and the golf course there is spectacular. It's along the ocean and it's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
So she can't wait to go and just see it.
Well, she's a better wife than I am.
Yeah.
In many ways. Well, Lonnie, thank you so much. This has been encouraging, inspiring. I feel just so challenged and also excited to nourish my soul and get 1% better. And I know people will too. So thank you so much for being here.
For sure. Thanks.
Neighbors is produced by Logger Creative and Taylor Minning. Music by Austin and Lindsay Adamak. Artwork by Wesley Parsons. And motion graphics by Robbie Burns.
Living to love like, I'm living to love like you have loved me. You show me brighter days, new mercies every morning. You never shy away.